Today, me and my senior editorial colleague, Ms. Noor Fatima Wasia, who's our group editorial director and is the editor of the BW Marketing World, and me will engage in a conversation with a friend for 2 decades and somebody all of you in the marketing world know, Mr. Ramesh Thomer, who's the president of Equitor, and he's advised many brand owners on various facets of building brands and building businesses. He's a brand valuation expert, and he works with large brands, both Indian and multinational, in terms of how to build them, enhance them, and use them as growth drivers. So, welcome, Mr. Ramesh Thomas, to this BW Marketing Whisper. Uh, we are talking 15 months after the pandemic came upon us. A lot has changed. Can you encapsulate what has changed and what are its implications on business?
First of all, I'm extremely grateful and honored to be your inaugural speaker for what should be a really intriguing series of talks, the way you have captured the theme. I'm sure Anurag and you have a really provocative bunch of speakers lined up. But let's go to the role of marketing, since you asked that. Let's start with that. Yeah. I think for me, and I've said this many times before also, and I think in your presence, I think it's a time to reach out and to be even more engaged. So we were just having a little chat, Noor and myself, before we started. It says, people tend to be more conservative at these times. People want to be safer. My simple question to everybody on this call is, imagine if that logic were to be applied to frontline health workers. If they are going to be more careful and more conscious at this time, we'd all be dead. So this is the time, even for marketeers, for people who are doing marketing, to reach out more, to be more engaged, to be more sensitive, and to be more brave. Right? Because it is during a crisis, actually, if you look at it physiologically, that all our senses get actually heightened to another level. I think we all remember, people ask, when were you when JFK was assassinated? And everybody has a very clear idea. When were you when Indira Gandhi was assassinated? Everybody has a clear idea. Because during that crisis, when we felt crushed, right, our senses got very heightened. So typically, any meaningful or mean engagement at this time, gets amplified. It's been said before, and I'm saying it again. Engage more during bad times. It will pay off very big in good times. But for that, you need a mindset which has a longitudinal view. Yeah, if you look at this quarter, this transaction, this year, I think it's on the work. So in these times, you actually have a physiological opportunity to make a deeper impression on your audience. It's not somebody else's audience, it's your audience. 3 quick examples. I'm sure you heard about the Gillette Barber Suraksha program, where in 3 or 4 states, they actually provided a COVID insurance scheme and protective kits when they were working. People still needed a haircut, right? And that was amazing. Okay, Taj Hotels during the last lockdown served 3 million meals to frontline workers and had 1.2 lakh medical staff housed in 75,000 commercial rooms. Right? These are recently had some in 8 states of India to those who were impacted, the incomes were impacted by COVID. These are not idiots. These are clever people with a very clear eye on the ball as far as their P&L is concerned. Why do they do this? Because it will stand them in great stead once this is over. But for which you need to have a longitudinal view. A transactional view is never a good thing, even if you think of in terms of your own benefits for the next 3 or 4 years.
Absolutely, Ramesh. And Ramesh, I just want to ask you, you're so right that we have to build in the well-being of our colleagues in the ecosystem, third-party partners, as a part of our business strategies. That's what I'm hearing. And build communication around that. That's what I'm hearing from them. But, one of the things is, in the last 15 months, there have been more unicorns that have come up in India than in the last 5 years. Now, these unicorns are new brands. Over the last few years, they have delivered, and in the pandemic, which they've become even more accentuated because they're digital platforms. Uh, what do you have to say about their valuations, and what do you have to say about the brand impact of these unicorns, which have been around between 5 to 8 years?
So, are you asking about the validity of the valuations of some of these unicorns?
Yes, see, again, valuation is what the market street accepts, and there is a FOMO, there is a fear of missing out on. So, without taking the name of a particular brand, there are brands that are going for IPO, and there is a mad scramble for their shares. Even if you look at Nazara, which debuted a couple of weeks back, it was oversubscribed 84 times. 84 times. So clearly there is, consumer tech brands and digital first brands are having a certain kind of aura around them. Let's put it way. There is a futuristic expectation from them. Give us a sense of what do you think of these unicorns that have been created 3, 4, 5 years?
Okay, so let me go back a little bit. If you go back 10 to 15 years, the flavor of the month for many PEs was the real estate business. Okay, then the real estate business fell out of favor. The next thing was retail. Okay, and then everybody was investing into retail. Okay, that was the next flavor of the month, and then that fell out of favor. The next one was e-commerce. Right, e-commerce is slowly tapering off. Okay, then was fintech. Now you are going to have the next one is going to be gaming. So typically in the investment horizon, you look at it, there will always be flavors of the month. And the particular flavor of the month will get very high multiples at that point of time because everyone is scrambling for, as you said, for FOMO, the fear of missing out, to be in that particular space. And therefore, you will typically get valuations which don't have much connection to, let's say, a 5-year plan, an NPV, the typical technical things we talk about in evaluation. There doesn't seem to be much of a connection. Having said that, I think some of these things have been timed right, have come in at the right time, and have made a big difference. If you look at a Bezos, for example. Now, do you consider the valuation to be of validity? That's not the point. Okay. So whether it should be 1 billion or 5 billion or 12 billion is not the point I'm making. But some of these have come and hit it very well. Gaming is a big deal. Okay. Whether Nazara deserves that 84 times or not, is not my question. But it is here to stay. I think we need to separate between some of the brave new ideas that have come in, the role of technology in making those ideas, breathing life into those ideas, and what it can do for a much larger bunch of people who otherwise would not have been served by the same service if it hadn't been for these ideas. Fintech is a very good thought, right? Look at the number of people who are able to, I'm able to pay my Thobi with GPay today. I couldn't have done it before. So is the idea valid? Is it breakthrough? Is it going to serve large number of people? The answer is a definitive thumping yes. Do they deserve the valuations that we are banding out today? That is based entirely on the flavor of the month. And therefore, I think if we don't judge the valuations and look at it from the point of view of the validity and scalability of these ideas, the relevance of this idea to modern India, I think these are two separate questions.
Okay. Noor, I was asking you, what in your view has changed in marketing? Or does something need to change in marketing and in the way we build brands in the last 15 months?
In fact, Dr. Bhatt, I'm going to answer it in two parts to it. And this was something that I was going to even ask RJT in the course of our conversation, because I think a lot of brands can use with some advice right now. When I say two parts, it's talking about the art and the science. Now, at present, if we have to look at the art part of it or the messaging part of it, of course, the art is very unprecedented times because we're exploring solutions, and not all of our brands are sitting in a place where they can do it. I think it's very interesting that our ecosystem players, whether it's PR agencies per se, decided to give 4 days off or make it 4 work day as a and when employee first. This also kind of shows that they were putting stakeholders, which was a shareholder, whether it was a consumer, whether it was their employees first in this time. It was a very positive sign, I would have said. At the same time, there is the science part of it. The science has gone under tremendous what we're facing in the new digital world. We're talking about that. We're talking power being concentrated back in the hands of the big technology, which should the crisis brought us back to ground zero. So if you look at the pure science part of it, marketers are going to face a very different kind of a challenge. Performance branding will become more of an issue than it has been in the past. If you look at the art part of it, they really need more advice on what to do. In fact, one of the points I wanted to pick up with RJT, I know he's Ramesh Ju Thomas. I'm going to go with that in the session. Is there a time when I know you said that they should be sensitive and they should be brave, but that combination is it's easier said than done.
Very, very important question.
Look at the IPL right now. Was it a good idea for brands to continue on it before it was suspended? So is there
separate question?
Quite.
Yeah. Okay. So very powerful question. Very, very valid. I'm saying let's look at this philosophically. In any relationship, when do you stay quiet? When you are indifferent or when you are disinterested in the relationship?
Yeah, cold period.
No, I'm not talking about, of course, counting when your girlfriend or wife, gives you the cold shoulder for 1 or 2 days. But that's only for 1 or 2 days, and that itself is a strong message. It's not keeping quiet, right? So you only stay quiet when you're indifferent towards a relationship or when you're disinterested in it. So if you believe that your brand relationships are truly meaningful and long-term, you don't keep quiet. You talk even more because they need it, because you need it. Right? Again, if you think of brands as being transactional, then you switch off. Then you only start smiling again at your consumer when you need the next sale. But if you think of brands as truly long-term relationship with a longitudinal view, then you talk more, you engage more. Staying quiet is not an option, right? You need to dig deep. You need to find efficient ways. You may not have to spend a lot of money, but you need to do it. You can't keep quiet. Staying quiet is not an option in a long relationship. We all know that. Brands are no different. Secondly, a question. Is marketing a taking function or a giving function? Right? So when you think of finance, it's to collect. Yeah, the high ground of finance is cash flows. Okay. In sales, you need to meet a target. Yeah. But when you talk about marketing, you talk about things like understanding the consumer, CRM, customer relationship, loyalty, advocacy. Why would you keep quiet if these are your key result areas? It doesn't make any sense to me. And particularly, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, it is a time to talk because in a crisis, we all need each other. Number two, it is in a crisis that physiologically, whatever we said will be kept in memory for a long time. So the answer to your question is staying quiet is not an option.
What about when it came to IPL? There was so much of sentiment at that time that suspended. There were many big brands that invested significantly on it. Were they doing the right thing with that investment at that time?
Look, it's like this. Again, there are two parts, like, Anurag's previous question. 2 Grand Slams have happened during the COVID. The entire NBA season happened. Okay, enough precautions were taken. There were no people. It was extremely well organized. In the NBA, we saw the bio bubbles being constructed. In the tennis, Grand Slams, I didn't see any people at all except the organizers. But it happened. And many people in the comfort of their drawing rooms enjoyed the best players in the world still continuing to play with a lot of protection. Right? And the IPL, for its own, in its own way, said it's a way of giving a break to people from bad news. Okay? I think that's valid. But perhaps the other issue may not have been managed well, was that the level of sensitivity that such a large and popular event, right, demonstrated towards the daily sufferings of millions of countrymen, who in fact are their core franchise, their core audience. So I think a little bit of sensitivity could have been shown.
Fair enough.
Now, somebody asked me, what is your advice to brands on IPL, who are on IPL? It's very interesting. If you do a search of IPL plus crisis, you know what comes up first? Pat Cummins. And that is a damn shame. His $50,000 made a big difference. This event is India-centric. This is run by a very powerful, very well-to-do Indian institution called BCCI, right? Why doesn't the Indian talk to the Indian? It's an Indian crisis. Imagine if you were doing something last year in the middle of a crisis in Italy, and Italians didn't come to talk about Italians. that some Indian or some American had to talk about it. Why Pat Cummins? Right? So that level of sensitivity could have been shown by everybody concerned, by brands, by players, by the institutions who are running it.
Ramesh, I want to ask, see, you talk to CEOs, MDs, founders of businesses, also CMOs of large businesses. When you have conversations with them, do they value strategic advice or counsel, or what I call marketing strategy, from an outsider much more than they did earlier? What has changed on the ground in terms of thinking when it comes to the marketing boardrooms? And what are you whispering into the marketers?
So I can whisper whatever I want, but I speak to many people, very interesting people, startups at one level, mid-sized companies, family businesses who are trying to grow, limited number of multinationals, etc., etc. Okay, and I split them up into two parts to answer your question. Okay, one is we meet a lot of interesting people, young CEOs who are very clear that they want to set high standards for the future and they want to build deep relationships. The moment these two criteria are met, right, then strategic advice hits home very quickly, very hard, meaningfully, and they invest into it with all their might. When I talk to people, a large number who are purely transactional and saying, boss, इस क्वार्टर में कुछ बात नहीं करने का है, ये सब फालतू बात है, then what happens is strategic advice is of no consequence to them. Transactional advice makes sense. Can I quickly raise some money? What can I do to clear my, let me say, stocks lying in my godown, right? These are important, but is it overlaid with a sense of a long-term deep relationship and continuing to keep high standards? If you meet these two pillars, you typically will get an extremely good year for long-term strategic relationships. And they will be committed to the implications of it also. I hope that answers your question.
Ramesh, understood. As an entrepreneur and a business owner, I understand what you're saying. You and me have had conversations over the last 10 years. Yes. And so I understand what you're trying to tell me. Now let me ask you. See, they say if your bank account does not have money, how will you give money to others? Now, how does Ramesh Jute Thomas make sure he stays ahead of the curve? Yeah, I know art of counsel, the art of whispering, the art of analyzing, the art of strategy is something that stays constant. Asking the right questions, that's given. Well, how do you make sure you stay relevant, you stay ahead of the curve, you know more than these guys? What do you do to be future-proof, so to say?
Yeah. So let's break that into two parts. I think there needs to be a COVID part, which I think will emphasize or magnify some of the aspects of what you raised. Secondly, let's look at it in peacetime. And I'm saying COVID and peacetime deliberately. I think we are like in a warlike zone. Okay. So let's look at what a small company like us also did in the last 1 year. It was terrible for us because when people are saying, there is no future, how do I spend money on you? So our entire funnel got knocked out and 80% of our bookings got knocked out. Okay. So what do? You go back, it's very easy to say we are very small and these people have cancelled our bookings and therefore we are the sufferers in this. It's very easy to have a victimhood in this. But the reality is they have come to you to seek advice. And in seeking advice, they think of you as being senior. They think of you as a shoulder to lean on. And that's the way you must behave, whether at my level as a founder of the company or at the level of people who work with me who are 30, 35, 40 years old, it doesn't matter. So I said, go back and look at what troubles they've got. Go back and talk to them about what they can do, what you can do for them. It could be only for the next 1 month. Go back and don't talk about money. So what happened in the end? Not only did we land up with the same revenues as the previous year, we didn't grow, but we were much more profitable. And secondly, we built a lot of relationships were much deeper than before. Right? So even for a small company like us who doesn't have a huge balance sheet to speak of, cannot be generous in bad times, it is important to be abundant. It's important to say that if they have come to me, let me respect the nature of the relationship that they have come to me with. I cannot think of being small or big. I cannot think of being a victim in the front of a 1,000 crore company CEO. It's not true because there's insecurity is what you have to look at now in the context of the relationship that you're structured with them. It is not a relationship big and small. It's a relationship of counselor and counselee.
In a world where e-commerce has become dominant, brand loyalty is challenged, right? Because you're looking at different brands on the virtual shelves. In this world, what do brands do to keep building on brand trust or remain in the consideration set at least?
Okay, so you're saying the big bad wolf is the e-commerce, right? We won't take names, but we know who are the big names. Okay, and therefore, in this kind of a situation, is there any role for individual brands?
Yes, loyalty.
Okay. So I'm saying that, see, there are three aspects to this. One is, please understand that when you go to an Amazon or a Flipkart or Zynga, whoever it is, okay, or Alicious is an independent brand, but you are actually choosing to go to an Amazon. Okay, and therefore at that level, you're also going to a brand by choice. Amazon is not the only guy on the planet, right? There's a Tata Click, there is a Flipkart, there are all these people. The second is, within that, you must look at them as probably like a large format, a mall, right? And you go into the mall, you still make choices about individual brands. You can buy from Madura Garments, you can buy from, Arrow, or whoever it is that you need to buy from. So there are brands there also. But where it makes a difference is that the smaller brands with not much equity are, number one, either going to get swallowed up, right? Or they will continue to do well because there is a marketplace under the umbrella of Amazon that they will enjoy. Now, under the umbrella of Amazon, an individual brand still needs to stand out because there are many people like him in the marketplace. Okay, so brands and choices are not going to go anywhere because we are still make choices as human beings. Okay, going to Amazon is a choice. Making a choice of a brand inside Amazon is also a choice because all those things line up and you click and you browse and say, that's the one I want. Then you go to a rating or whatever it is. All of these are now new elements adding on to the choice. But the idea of choice is not changing. We may have now today a rating, right, as a game changer, as an element of making the choice. We didn't have the rating before, but we're still making a choice. The point is, it's an enabled choice. It's still a choice. And those who don't have equity will still continue not to have equity. They will sit inside a market like when we go to the vegetable market. There are no names, but being inside the market helps the guy, and that's what's going to happen to small brands in an Amazon.
One of our viewers right now is asking: is there even a need for a CMO now?
Is there a need for a CMO at all? Okay,
yes,
2 days ago, I'll refer you to a piece that I wrote in the Mint. It was a fairly large piece, right? The title was, "Why Are Brands Missing Representation on the Boardroom?" Right? So if you look at a CMO from the point of view of the traditional role, which was really about the chief communications officer, right, who was dealing with agencies and logos and stuff like that, that's a slippery slope. It's a downward slippery slope. But we know today that with the risks involved, with the forecasts, with shareholders breathing down your neck, right, and the brand also being the single largest element of your valuation. Today, on an average, between 30 and 40% of the value of a firm is lying in its brands. All you have to do is do a simple test of absence, and you will know that if you don't have the brand from tomorrow, your business is going to go down the tube. Therefore, it's an asset. And the CMO is nothing but the custodian of the biggest asset the company's got. If this were to be true, right, and a CMO is now, imagine him to be a permanent invitee on the board, then his role has changed dramatically. Number one, he's the protector and guardian of the single largest piece of capital the company's got and shareholders have got. Number one. Number two, he has to be responsible for a clear, defendable, and mathematical return on capital on that asset. Number three, he must be able to link that growth to the growth of the value of the firm itself. So his role has dramatically changed from being the head of communications of looking after an advertising agency's relationship. Right? He is now a critical and integral part, if not the most dominant part, of creating value for the firm. Right? Now, traditionally, look at it. Who is the guy who's a permanent invitee? The CFO, because he runs the numbers. Okay, he runs the numbers. Right? So you're giving them numbers, but in so doing, they are completely blindsided to the role the presence, the protection, and the value and the contribution of the largest asset any company has got today, which is its brand. I'm not making this up. 20 years of work has told us that 30 to 40% of the value of a company is lying in its brand assets. So are you telling me that there is no custodian for it? The CMO's role has changed. In that new role, I desperately need a good CMO. And the CMO needs to be on a permanent invitee on the board, right? If you think of him as being a traditional role, then it's a slippery slope. I agree with you. But please change the perspective. Right? In today's context, especially with the earlier question that you asked me, competition, visibility, forecast that you have made public, etc., this is a critical role. And this is a strategic role for the future of the firm.
It bounds back to what you just spoke about, all the different roles that are coming in. Now, what are we trying to say? Marketing is changing, CMO's role is changing. Very soon we won't have a CMO, but some other designation that will be doing this role. What is the structure which we are headed to?
Yeah, so I'm saying once a CMO has become a permanent invitee to the board, right? He has a strategic role and he's in charge of the single largest asset the company's got, i.e. the brand asset, okay? These functions will continue to be there, but I believe will report it to the CMO. Okay. For example, if you look at the president marketing at Thomas Cook, he's in charge of innovation, he's in charge of customer, customer service also, and he's in charge of engagement. So these roles are coming under him. Okay. Now the other big question, which you may have wanted to ask me, is then what's the whole role of technology? Today, there are two very interesting pieces of data. 27% or more, which is the single largest chunk of technology spends for the Fortune 500 companies, right, is going on marketing technology. That means technology which is going to serve marketing, right? More than a quarter of marketing budgets themselves, right, are going into MarTech. And an increasing number of people in the Fortune 500, the firms, are having someone called a chief MarTech officer, like a fintech. There's a MarTech officer who is separate from the CMO. And as the CMO's role gets elevated to a very board level strategic role, these are going to be important functional roles that support him. The innovation role, the customer service role, the MarTech role are going to be very critical parts that report into him, because he finally, through the engagement on the demand side processes to the board, is going to be accountable for how each of these rolls up into creating value for the firm.
Perfect. You can barely hear me, so I'll put it on chat again, which is about, it's a final question, in fact, marketing contributing to business growth tangibly. Are we seeing it?
There aren't enough metrics which are evolved right now with all companies as compliance. I believe the day is not far away, right? You today have green reporting, which is a lot of compliance. Okay. But actually, if you look back at what we said, if marketing is, or your brand is your biggest contributor, then you're soon going to come to the day when it's going to be compliance where marketing reporting has to be done, which is what is the level of advocacy that you're enjoying? What are your NPS scores, right? What is the share of wallet that you're getting from your business, from your customers, right? All of these, what is your loyalty levels? All of these are talking about the long-term health of a company, but all related to the consequence of marketing as a function, right? So if my share of wallet goes up, number one, my business goes up. Number two, I'm more profitable. Yeah. Number three, I'm more valuable. Number four, I'm more stable. And all of these, whether it's advocacy, whether it is share of wallet, whether it is loyalty, we all know that businesses that come back to us rather than looking for more businesses are number one, stable. Number two, come to us faster. Number three, are more profitable. This is all about value, and it's about long-term sustainable value. So these metrics are going to come very soon as core reporting. It is not enough to show me a revenue growth number, a profit number, and a free cash flow number. Right? It is important to know how the metrics that connect marketing to my growth are in place and whether we are faring well on them.
Oh, this is again coming from one of our viewers, and her question is, what are the kind of questions your brands or people that you talk to at Equitor are asking you right now? What worries them? What worries them the most?
Okay. Outside of the crisis that we are facing today, right? I think there's a whole lot of optimism as far as the route that India can take. The question is, what is it about us, both in terms of a domestic headroom as well as our ability to play in an international market? What is it about us that we can isolate and go after? Okay. And there is this whole bunch of very, very good businesses. They could be family business, they could be startups, like I said, who have this gene of being able to commit themselves to very high standards and to commit themselves to long relationships. These are the people who can make a footprint abroad, irrespective of the category. I'll give a small example of somebody I met like just 3 days ago. He started an online pawn shop. Okay, he just has 6 outlets, going to become 600 very fast, right? But he sells 46 different varieties of pawn. This is not the point I'm making. What I was shocked at, he said, "Sir, you must take a look at what we provide. So can I please have the honor of serving your family tonight? Only tonight. After that, you can pay for it." Okay. So he sends me a 4-pack of Magai, beautiful green color, absolutely international packaging. You open it, and there are 4 Magais there, packed individually inside. But here's the thing. Along with that, there is a packet of wet wipes. Okay, very simple logic. But see the detail that man has gone to set high standards. In which country in the world will he not be accepted? Okay, when we don't shortcut, when we want to set high standards, when we are committed to long relationships, we can do anything, anywhere. And we've got a bunch of clients who talk to us about that. Okay, and we are deeply committed to them because they're committed to themselves. Then they'll do very well. So typically the questions are, how far can I go? And we are saying the sky's the limit for people like you. People who come to us are transactional, we get them some money and send them on their way. But this is the exciting part of the new India, outside of this crisis.
Some positive points to end this conversation on. I have to thank our we have to apologize for the bad connection at my end as well as overall whatever was happening. But I'm grateful for your time on a Saturday morning. Very grateful to RJT for his candid comments, and I'm hopeful that we'll off record on this as well, RJT.
Thank you very much for having me.
All the best.
Have a great day.